And welcome to everybody to our Facebook Live. This is our first time doing this, so this is really exciting. If it all goes well, we'll continue doing it this way. So you have two options. So if you don't want to drive on a rainy night, you don't have to. So again, thank you for coming. Our presentation tonight is going to be about sex, all things sex. My portion of it's going to be a little different than Dr. Guerette's, so he'll be joining us shortly. We titled this, "Is this normal? Is it normal?" When we all feel that way, but who can you ask, really? You can ask us. That's what we're here for. We keep a lot of that inside because we were never taught to really talk about it and talk about the things that we're going through when it comes to these intimate details. But we are here to empower you and to let you know there are options. This should be discussed. We should be talking about this with our friends and really letting everybody know that there are treatment options and there is hope. Even with people or when people, practitioners tell you there's no hope, there is hope. There are so many different things out there. So we'll talk a little bit about that. My portion is a little bit more about the hormones. I want you to know that you are not alone. I think I make that abundantly clear. I try to tell everybody that comes into that space with me that you are not alone. I have heard this before. Maybe I've even gone through it before, but this is, you're not crazy and you're not alone. Most women experience changes in their sexual health. It's part of life. And we see the transition. We see things change as we go through the lifespan. Primarily when we hit menopause or even after menopause, we see a lot of differences. So desire and comfort and arousal change over time. Our relationships change, right? And these concerns are really common. Again, common doesn't mean you have to deal with it. It doesn't mean you have to accept it and say, well, I'm of a certain age, so I just shouldn't be doing this, or I shouldn't be enjoying sex. I feel like as women, we were never told that we should enjoy it. In fact, I believe we were shamed and told that, hey, don't talk about it, don't discuss it, you shouldn't enjoy yourself. And I'm here to tell you now, we have come a long ways over these last 20 plus years, where now we can boldly say, this is a part of who I am. And none of us get here without sex, bottom line. So thank God, even though, ooh, to think about our parents, right? So goals really are to help you feel less alone. Your questions are common, that we want you to be more informed and understand the role of hormones and changes throughout the lifespan. We want you to feel empowered so that you know that there's options and that there's help and you are absolutely in the right place. Dr. Guerette is amazing at what he does. He has perfected this craft. I am honored to be able to work with him. And I want you to remember that low desire or low libido or issues with sex are only really a problem if it's a problem for you or if it's causing conflict in your relationship. So before I get further into it, I forgot, I need to introduce myself. My name is Annie Edwards. I'm a nurse practitioner here at the Intimate Wellness Institute. One of the things that I love about this is seeing people improve their lives. It is the only job in medicine where I have actually seen people's lives, their quality of life improve. I see people walking in feeling hopeless and unheard, and I see them walking out with a game plan and empowerment, and I love that. I love that from my sisters here, and I just absolutely love what I do, and I feel honored to be here and honored to be able to speak with you about this. My background really is in EMS and paramedicine. I did ER, and then I did family nurse practitioner, and I saw a huge disparity with women, especially women of a particular age. And at a certain time, it's almost like you get written off, right? Nobody wants to do a pelvic exam. Nobody wants to talk to you about sex. Nobody wants to address your concerns. And it is such a huge part of our development and our joy and our happiness and our quality of life that I felt really frustrated by that as a practitioner. To see some of these women dismissed, even at specialists, was heartbreaking. So when I had the opportunity to join on here, I just latched on and ran. I love it. And I'm excited that you're here and that other people are able to watch and understand that there are things that we absolutely can do to make your life better. So what we'll cover today is just libido 101, brain, body, and context. What does that mean? How is this working for me or against me? That hormones can influence desire, arousal, and comfort. That there are common patterns. We'll kind of look through the lifespan. We all know how it felt, maybe some of us, after having a baby, or while we were breastfeeding, how desire and things changed as opposed to perimenopause and menopause. And these are all hormone related. Some are transient and some are long lasting. We're going to talk about why pain and desire are so tightly linked, why there's a hinge there, and some evidence-based options for treatment like lifestyle, pelvic health, and some targeted treatments that we offer here. And again, question and answers at any time, especially at the end. We'll leave some time for that as well. So the big picture, sex is not just physical. I think we all know that. How many memes have you seen where women are like, well, look at that guy vacuuming, he has really done something for me. Or even those little kind gestures we don't even realize from our partner, whoever that partner is, and we're like, that really did something for me. So we know that basically our biggest sex organ is our brain. So we that really does. So if anything hinders us in any way, whether it's pain or maybe we don't feel so great about our body, there's been times in our lives where we felt more attractive than others, and that impacts how we deal with and enjoy sex and intimacy. Hormones, we mentioned, nerves are important, blood flow is important, muscles, structurally, that is important. Dr. Guerette will get more into the muscles and the structure and how he can correct these issues. Emotions, like we just said. So, if we're not feeling so great, if things aren't going so well, if we're feeling depressed for whatever reason, it's going to impact our libido or our sex drive. So we have to remember that our body works as a system. It's a harmony. It's an orchestra. While, the violin section sounds great, and the tuba section, the brass section sounds great alone, together with everything, the drums, all of that, it's beautiful. And that's what we want. We aim for harmony in our lives and balance. So again, the hormone orchestra. So how do our hormones really run this show? What's going on? So when we think of estrogen, we think about tissue health. I jokingly say, if you come to my house, there's going to be some potted plants that don't look so great. I forget to water them. That's me. That's Oni. I feel like that's how our tissue looks when we lack estrogen, particularly the tissue in our vaginas. So it dries out, it gets thin, it gets weak. Estrogen is responsible for keeping that nice and plump and giving the collagen and the elasticity and everything. Estrogen also helps with comfort by providing the lubrication that we need. So oftentimes we go through the menopause process and our estrogen starts going low, and over time you'll see the vaginal tissue start to dry out, like one of my potted plants at home, and you're like, oh, that's not so great. That doesn't lead to good things at all. So whereas testosterone, as we all know a guy, we all know a man somewhere, the testosterone they have, we see that it impacts arousal in them. It also does in us as well. Desire, arousal, sensation, energy, focus, and even I'd say a little bit of confidence, where, again, we know men and they're like, even the most awkward man thinks he is something else. Like, I want what they have. That is closely linked to testosterone as a hormone. Progesterone is really important for our mood, for balance, for sleep. We all know if we're not getting sleep, we're not feeling like doing anything. I'm a wreck if I'm tired. Thyroid, cortisol, insulin helps with energy, stress, metabolism, depression, things like that. And so when one thing is off, the whole system can be off. They play so closely together. So we see that that harmony and that balance needs to be present in order for us to feel whole as a person. So that being said, libido is a system. We have the brain chemistry and the body and the hormones. So the brain, we need that desire signal. We need that dopamine hit, right? We're not going to have that if we don't have enough estrogen and testosterone. We're just not going to have it. We're not going to have the feel good hormones. So we know that inhibitors can include stress. We've all been stressed out before, and probably desire is the lowest thing on our list when we have all these things to worry about and we're carrying the load of family and friends and work and stressors. Anxiety is an interesting one because you can be an anxious person, maybe have moments when you're able to relax. When your hormones are a little off, it's almost like that anxiety is like, oh, come on, baby, we're going to get worse. We're going to make your life so much fun. And then we need that attention, that novelty, that safety, that safe person who understands us. So this is all interconnected. Again, going back to the physical, which again, Dr. Guerette will touch on, we are talking about tissue and lubrication like we did about with estrogen. Arousal, blood flow, the nerves. So estrogen also, interestingly enough, brings blood flow back to that tissue. Whereas, think again, potted plant, there's nothing. It's like nothing's going on there. We want to increase that blood flow and that drive to that area. And there are receptors for estrogen and testosterone in the cells of our vaginal tissue, and in a lot of our cells, skin primarily. So just keep that in mind, that it is important to not only have it going through our bodies, but also maybe sometimes even localized to that area. And again, energy and mood, I can't say it enough. Thyroid is so important. When I did emergency medicine, when we have a person who comes in with an emotional or mental health crisis, one of the first labs we draw is a thyroid lab. Why do we do that? Because thyroid, when it is really low, can cause severe depression. And I don't know if anybody has a thyroid disorder, but you don't have the energy sometimes to move. You don't want to. You feel depressed, and all the things that come along with depression, losing interest in things that you once liked, having some discord with loved ones, things like that. So thyroid is so very, very important. So again, when one thing is off, everything is thrown off. Oh, I pushed the wrong button, sorry. So just like I promised, there's the life stages that we all remember. Maybe we've gone through them all, maybe we haven't. I'm pretty sure we've all crossed that line into perimenopause, menopause at this point. I'm in the club, love it here. Highly recommend it. Whereas before, when we were postpartum, let's say we just had a baby, what were some things that made you feel not so desirable and not interested in sex? It would have been low estrogen, sleep debt, and maybe even pain in the healing process, right? And then the overburden, the anxiety, everything, being a new parent, maybe all of those things. And then maybe we breastfed, and we would have high prolactin levels. We would have had, again, sleep debt, anxiety, stress, low ovulation hormones, and sometimes even vaginal dryness. At least we knew then, or we thought then, that this might go away in a few weeks, or this might go away when I stop breastfeeding. We cross over that heart over to perimenopause, and we don't know when it's going to end. And I think that's where we want you to know that there's hope. Whereas when we were younger, we knew it was probably transient. We knew this would probably pass. Maybe we weren't with the right partner. Maybe we had things, but we thought, well, I'm young enough. I can bounce back from that. Once we cross over and we go, what is wrong with me? What is this? What is happening? That's when we start realizing, like, we're having hormone fluctuations, or even decline in our very important hormones that make us feel happy and make us have that desire. And so we have the mood changes, right? Where I jokingly say sometimes there were times when I was like, I don't like the way my husband smells. I hope he's not watching. And it was always my hormones. We have the sleep changes. And again, when you're wrecked, when you're not getting sleep, just like when we were younger, if you had sleep deprivation, you're not a very pleasant person to be around. And you may even be having brain fog, and you're just coping just to get through the day, let alone feel desirable and have those intimate moments with somebody that you love. It's almost the last thing on your plate because you're not handling stress as well. Your fuse might be a little shorter than it used to be. So that can shift desire. And then as we go through the menopause cycle, or to, as we shift on through, as the years pass, we start seeing some changes in the vaginal tissue itself. And that's something that's predictable, but we can treat it. So we have, of course, the lower estrogen, but then those tissue changes, structural changes. You might start seeing more UTIs at this point. And that, who wants to feel intimate or feel good when you're having a urinary tract infection? So we, think about those things that can impact it. But if there are sudden changes in libido, let's say you were doing fine, you were trucking along just fine, and you don't think this is hormone related, or you don't think this is so much anything going on. I'm too young for this. This doesn't make any sense. It can be medications. So sometimes our SSRIs or SNRIs, things like Prozac, things that help our mood, can cause slowing of orgasms, can cause us to like deplete or almost blunt that desire feeling. Even though it's making us feel better and we're less depressed, it can slow down orgasms. So they're very known for that. Sometimes blood pressure medications can do that. Sedating medications, alcohol, cannabis, they can all kind of blunt that effect, and you don't feel as much desire. So we often, when we check on this, we got to look at your medications, see what's going on in your life, see what you're doing. And then the health and life contributors, like, again, depression and anxiety, which can come on suddenly. You have a sudden loss of a loved one, that you can actually say, yep, that's what happened, and that's why I feel this way. Diabetes and heart disease, sleep problems. Again, I can't say it enough. I value my sleep like nothing else. And when I don't get good sleep, I'm not my best in any arena of my life. So it can definitely wreck out all those things. Pain can do it. So, and we'll get into that pain response and that reward system. But if you have pain even just one time, your likelihood of having it again, it worries you so much that you almost don't want to. And then you're in your head about it. And you're like, oh my gosh, should I don't even know if I should try. I don't know what to do. So it kind of like a baseball player that struck out and they get up to the plate again and they're like, I don't know if I can do this. So just remember that. And then of course, relationship strain. We all know that, when our significant other isn't vacuuming, then we get a little like, I'm tired of doing all the work. So again, we've talked about this a little bit, but estrogen, again, supports the tissue, the health of the tissue, the elasticity, the comfort, the lubrication, and it's a key driver. And I don't know if, like when we were all having regular periods, we would probably have a higher libido at one point during our cycle, and then in others that was normal. That's when the estrogen was rising. Testosterone, believe it or not, we make it. It's not just a man hormone. We have always made it. And when it goes low, we feel very depleted and not very desired or desirable. Bottom line, it's important for both genders. So men need it too. And when theirs starts to decrease, we start to see their decline as well. Progesterone, again, important for mood and sleep, kind of calms you down. I always say that estrogen is sort of like the gas in your car, and progesterone's kind of the brakes. So they balance one another really, really well. Where estrogen's like, oh, we're going to feel good. Progesterone's like, let's just calm down. Let's just take it easy. Let's go to sleep. It's mildly sedating when taken orally at night. It's lovely. It's a great hormone. Again, thyroid with energy, mood, and sexual function. And then we hear cortisol all the time, right? Like, oh, my cortisol's high, and that's leading to stress. So cortisol response are important. They have kept us alive as a species for forever. And it's good. It's protected us. But sometimes with our lifestyles, traffic, weather, social media, we have events where our cortisol just rises and rises and rises, and it can absolutely lead to chronic stress, which can lead to poor sleep, and then those desire pathways are just clogged up like a bad highway. So when it comes to sex, comfort really, really matters. So we're talking about the genitourinary syndrome of menopause, meaning estrogen declines and the tissue starts to dry out like my house plants. It becomes thinner, drier, more sensitive, and I can't like stop the image because you can actually see, absolutely visualize that when I could do an exam and I can say, oh, this person's tissue has been deficient of estrogen. I can see it. And I can see when it starts to rejuvenate too, which is the great thing, because it can. It's not like you get to a certain point and you're going to stay there. You can improve. You won't necessarily have to worry. I got an amen in the back of the room. Yes, we might want to hear from you. Thank you. So that can lead to, of course, pain with sex, sandpaper feeling, tearing, more frequent UTIs. So we not only are weaker and thinner, but now the pH has changed. And now we have a great environment for bacteria to hang out and party, which is not what we want. And so the arousal will decrease because our body's trying to protect ourselves. You know, you get an injury, you do everything you can to protect that injury. It's no different, even though it's not a bone or a joint, it's no different than a bone or a joint. Any questions so far or comments? Okay. So here's that pain desire loop that I was referring to. So we start with some pain and irritation, right? And that gets us anxious about what if this happens the next time? What if I scared my partner? What if they know? Or you start with anxiety. I don't like the way I look. I don't like my size, or I don't like the way my labia look, or whatever, you know, whatever the case may be. It'll increase your anxiety. It's almost like you have stage fright and you're worried about it. And so that can lower arousal. It's not going to make you feel ready to roll. You're going to feel a little less, you're just going to be held back a little bit because of all these things that you have going on in your mind. And then when arousal is lower, of course, the lubrication is going to be lower, and it'll lead to more pain. And then that loop just keeps on going. And we are here to break that cycle. That's what you're here for today. If you're having any issues with this, today's the day to break that cycle and to at some point have some interventions so that you can have and enjoy your life to the fullest. So when we evaluate you here, we're going to just clarify your goals, because our goals are not always the same, right? So some people are very comfortable, I jokingly say this, no offense, being a Catholic nun. Some people are perfectly happy. Some people want to be, I don't know, 18-year-old boy. So there's a spectrum. I should make a spectrum, I don't know. And then some of us want to be somewhere in the middle. And some of us a little bit closer to that 18-year-old boy. Some of it, you know, everybody's different. So we have to identify what it is you want for yourself. What was normal for you? Or maybe you don't want normal anymore. Maybe you want like to go hard and to have a really good time. And that's fine. We're here for that, whatever you need. So we have to confirm too, obviously you wouldn't be here if it weren't distressing, right? So if it's causing you problem enough to maybe impact your life, your relationships with others, your daily activities, and you come in here, I'm going to say that's probably distressing, but we'll kind of get to the bottom of it too. Like how bad is it really? And how much do you want to change it? And then we'll come up with treatment plans for you. So that would include a pelvic examination sometimes, in some cases, not all, but we do need to see what that tissue looks like. We also need to see what the structure looks like. Sometimes it could be a structural issue and that's all that's going on. Something's coming down. You might be prolapsing. It could be the tissue, again, like we talked about, where it's getting thinner and drier and it's causing you pain. You could have muscles that are in a spasm. That could be causing the problem. You name it. There could be adhesion. I could go on and on. So Dr. Guerette's going to do that. But there are reasons why, and we need to investigate that to see if it's physical. And then we do labs oftentimes. So labs will help us to know, help me to know whether you're in a deficit, right? Estrogen, progesterone, testosterone, thyroid, just like we said. So, are you feeling like what came first? Were you feeling depressed, and that caused your issues, or was your thyroid off and you're really depressed and that's causing issues, and now it's snowballing and you have that effect going on? So we need to know that. So this is definitely a shared decision-making treatment plan. No two treatment plans are alike. Everybody's different. So again, combined with your goals, your comfortability, what it is you want to accomplish and how you want to accomplish it will be a decision that we make together. Nobody's going to say you're going to get this surgery or you're going to get this. And we're just going to say, here's what would probably work best for you, and let you take it at your own pace. So treatments are often layered, and that's usually the best. So we want you to have good pelvic floor support. So having weakened pelvic floor muscles can actually lead to laxity, which can also make you feel, less pleasure with sex, right? So we are interested in you getting pelvic floor support and making sure those muscles are nice and strong. Hormone optimization, just like we talked about, making sure those hormones are right where we want them to be and where we need them to be. Improving your sleep, whatever that means. I love talking about that because it's so important to me. There are so many supplements, there are so many things you can do. And in our culture, in our day and time, sometimes it's just hygiene. Are we watching YouTube videos way too late at night, getting too much blue light on our eyes? Are we stressed? Are we able to cope well? Is our room cool enough? Just simple little things too. No, not this one. I'm not taking a nap in here, that's for sure. And then the physical corrections. Again, that would be Dr. Guerette. Could help physically get everything where it properly needs to be if it's out of place or there's something wrong. And then therapies to restore the tissue, like we were talking about, those thin, dried out little house plants. We can restore them here, and we can have lots of different ways of doing that, whether it's with medication or with we have therapies here that are non-medication that can work as well. So there are many, many treatment plans that we can provide for you. So what do we offer? You name it, we offer it. So we have hormone replacement. So that can look like anything that, we can order it from the pharmacy. We can have it compounded, something you put on your body, like a lotion or a patch, or even pellets that we do here that go under the skin and last for about 3 months. That's one option. Pelvic floor therapy, we have a fantastic device here called the Umcella chair. It is you just sit on it just like you're sitting on your chair tonight. You're fully clothed, nothing goes into your body, so it's non-invasive, and it gives you about 11,700 kegels in about a 28-minute session. So you are just going to sit there and it's going to do the contractions for you. It makes a huge difference. I love that thing. We have the laser therapy here for rejuvenation of the tissue. We have overactive bladder treatments. So maybe your overactive bladder is holding you back from having a good quality of life and a good intimate relationship with your partner. If we're leaking urine all the time, or you feel like you're leaking urine all the time, or you're going to the restroom all the time, it's going to take away from your experience and make you just not have that good quality of life because you're worried about it. What if it's your weight? We can help you with that. We do weight loss therapies here. One amazing tool in our toolbox is Sculpt therapy. So the same company that makes that chair that causes the contractions also makes a device that you can put on your problem areas, your abdomen, your bottom, your thighs, your arms, your calves, and it causes contractions of those muscles and also can melt the fat as well. So it uses heat as well. Amazing. I love that thing too. And then there's surgical interventions. You don't want me doing surgery too. You want the big guy doing that. No, don't ask me to do that. Aesthetic gynecology. So again, if your body is holding you back, in other words, if you don't like the way that you look naked, you don't like the way that things look down there, you can get help for that. There are treatments for that. So don't let that hold you back. You're not broken. You're not flawed. everything is correctable, and you're in the absolute right place for all of that. So before I leave, I just want to give you some good resources. That QR code that's up there is links you to our website. So if you haven't visited our website, it is amazing. There are so many before and after pictures, some treatment options, and it's by category. So you can just look on our website. It is full of fantastic information and other links to other websites as well. Dr. Guerette has done a fantastic job educating and giving women that power. So if you have, a few minutes one night and you want to know about something that maybe you're not comfortable asking here, get on the website, check it out, and I promise you there'll be an answer to a question that you have on there. ACOG has some resources, a pamphlet called When Sex is Painful. NAMS also, it's a North American Menopause Society, has a handout on some of the pain with the tissue. And ISWISH has a women's sexual health resource. There's a lot of societies and things out there that can provide you with answers. Any questions? Do we have any questions from anybody? Yes. Okay.
So I am 30, and with my situation, but when I first discovered that sex wasn't supposed to be painful, it was kind of too late,
Right.
And I didn't realize it. I just, for a while, I just kind of thought everybody was, being a little dramatic. I was like, that great. But I never really actually had the conversation,
Right.
And so when I realized through my amazing husband and constant conversation, and are you okay? Because it just seems to me that you're really tense, and I just thought it was normal. But I think that because I had a child, I feel like I keep things swept under the carpet because it's like, well, you had kids,
Yeah.
Guys, I'm like, it's always been this way. I'm telling you, I've never not had this issue, and so I think it's been overwhelming for me because then I get, where it's like, I feel catered in the older group, but then it's like I feel like I get dismissed because I'm male.
Yes.
You know what I mean?
Yes.
And so I feel very broken because I don't know really what to do about it. So
yeah, we're in the right place. So if anybody, I'm just going to kind of repeat your question a little bit. If anybody couldn't hear, she brought up some amazing points. One, she felt like painful sex was normal. I think we all kind of grew up hearing that and thinking that, right? And we normalized it. Secondly, she had children. And so again, pain was normalized. Well, you had kids, just like we normalize peeing on ourselves when we laugh, right? Like, oh, I've had too many kids. It's not funny. Like, it's not something we should be normalizing. Yeah. So, and then finding somebody who will hear her is another tricky thing. Only 30? Only 30 years old. So finding somebody that'll hear her and give her a voice and say, hey, you're not broken and this is fixable, has been a challenge for her. So, and that I want to tell you, you're in the right place. You are among people who will support you. If there's anything you need, we have the treatments here that you may not even be aware exist. And I might not be the best at articulating all of them, but Dr. Guerette is, and you'll learn a whole lot from his presentation too. So we'll definitely, just like I was talking about the assessment, we'll find out what it is that's holding you back from feeling your very best. And you are young; you have a lot of life to live. Yeah, okay. Right? He's up there. You got to match his energy. She wants to be 18-year-old boy. I'm like, I'm with you, my friend. Yeah, that's right. And here's a fact. Like, you're a little young for this, but us little more mature women who have gone through perimenopause and menopause, we're going to spend like 40% of our life here. I'm not going to do it and not have fun. Like, I want to have fun. So I'm glad you're figuring it out now. While you're young. Do it. I would say any woman in this room would like pat you on the back and be like, yes, yes, it's time. Did you have a question?
I just wanted to add, I'm 31. I'm in medical menopause. I found out I had a cancer delivery very young. I don't work here, by the way. I just went to my other job. But I'm 31. I found Annie and Dr. Guerette, and my life has substantially. They really are the people that will hear you out and not treat you like you're something wrong. My old OBGYN, I was like, I'm still having hot flashes. There's something wrong. Right. And she's like, well, just keep trying this. And I found out it wasn't working with my body. Right. I had a 5-minute conversation with Dr. Guerette, and he's like, I don't think that's working for you. And he was right. They've improved my life substantially, and as a 31-year-old, I'm finally getting myself. Yes,
yeah.
I love that for you.
18-year-old boy.
Thank you.
Any other questions? All right, great. Well, thank you all so much for joining us. Dr. Guerette is going to kind of talk a little more about structural issues and interventions. All right. Okay, can you disconnect us?
No. Oh, you mean.
So while you get on there and do all that.
Yeah.
Okay. This is a good snack moment if anybody needs a snack.
I can't type sideways.
Everybody, yeah. Go ahead. It's gonna take me a minute. Yeah, go get some food, get some to drink, etc. Use the restrooms. We're used to that around here.
Guerette, I brought my cups.
All right.
Yeah, we got a bunch of them.
I gotta figure out how to log in here. So, this.
I have 3 kids. Kind of had some structure problems. So surgery to fix all that. And I'm finally getting my groove back.
It'd be easier to hook my computer up. Is it easier to change computers now that I'm on a let me just see what happens here. Because I have to like add my account thing I can't find.
And like nobody wanted to take me seriously.
Annie's was easy to connect, right?
Yeah.
When I found out I had the fracture, I made sure when it's correcting me now. And when I was like, I'm having hot flashes. Like 27, no one wanted to take me seriously.
Yeah.
You're not old. You're crazy.
I forgot to give it to Annie.
So I did like.
Yeah, okay, that's what.
Right. And when my hormone levels were up, I was like, this isn't kind of painful having sex. Like it was awful. Yeah. And like my husband's 32, and like I'm trying to have fun still, you know. And you have a 3 kids, but little time to do that. We got to count.
So what do we do?
Right. You put that on your.
Yep.
Do you have an extra one?
Yep.
You should be able to click.
I gotta get it connected.
Yep.
Yeah,
You click
perfect. Thank
your
you.
clicker clicks.
Great.
Right. It truly was a process, and I could not be more thankful to finally getting back to normalcy. It's like, I don't know about you, but I felt defective. I felt broken.
Because I didn't know. Like I said.
We're good.
And you got your mic on?
Yep. We got. Is the mic good? Tatiana, is the mic good? Give everyone a minute to settle down again. Thank you for coming, everybody. It's a nasty night out there. Not as nasty as it's been, though. You're lagging. Not surprising to me. All right. Well, yeah. Thank you everybody for coming. I'm Nathan Guerette. I'm a urogynecologist, pelvic reconstructive surgeon. And this is my practice. Annie is awesome. She left. I guess. Oh, there you are. I have my glasses on. Thank you for doing your talk. It's awesome. And when we're done, we'll have open questions for either one of us. So don't feel like if you didn't have a chance to ask Annie anything, you'll have plenty of opportunity at the end. This is so just as a matter of background, I am trained, double board certified in OBGYN and family practice, and then I'm fellowship trained in urogynecology and pelvic reconstructive surgery. Did my fellowship at Cleveland Clinic, originally from the north. Don't hate me for that. Been here since 2009. I opened this practice in 2009, we moved into this center in 2020. So we've been here since then. So we're going to kind of continue on where Annie left off. I'm going to talk a little more about like some of the technical aspects of what we do, not as much the touchy-feely aspects. So that's why we have a good balance. So anyway, in terms of understanding what we're about, Annie touched on it, but just to sort of make a succinct summary, this type of medicine is so poorly handled. Right? I think everybody in the room probably could attest to that. And we hear stories every day about people being ignored with these problems, nobody listening to them, telling them there's nothing that can be done, or not even getting to the point where they allow you to express yourself about what these problems are, either being made uncomfortable about it or ignored if you do speak up. So our goal is to really create a place that provides expert care. It's a warm, comfortable environment. The place looks like it looks for a reason. We don't want it to feel like a cold, sterile environment. And we want to keep everything holistic, open-minded, and have a collaborative approach to how we go about providing care, because these are sensitive issues. Not everybody's solution is the same. Everybody's a little bit different, and we have to understand what your goals are, what your expectations are to be able to meet them. If we just have the same tool for everybody, it's never going to work. And so that's why we have a lot of options, and we take the time to listen and understand. And we do focus on advanced new treatments. We're always looking for cutting edge options. And anything we can do better, we're always going to try to do better. Because if you think you have done the best you can do, it's time to quit. So, all right. So we're going to go fast here. So what's out there? Why is this so difficult for people? Well, women really have a loss of empowerment, a lot of self-shaming about these problems, lack of educational resources, and even though the internet provides a massive amount of information, it's unfiltered information, and you get junk. Like 99% of everything that's out there is absolute junk, and it's confusing. It's often terrifying. You think you're dying with everything you get, right? So it really, and sometimes is a negative. And because of that, you get a fear of seeking help and not feeling like you're going to get acceptance somewhere where you're looking for help. From our end, the training's lousy in these areas. I mean, just to be frank, even within women's health or urology, or even in traditional urogynecology. I was in academics before I was in my own practice at the University of Pennsylvania, And once you get outside of kind of standard urogynecology, the training and the interest in this stuff is awful. I mean, it just is. There's no interest. And so there's just traditionally very, very poor handling of these types of issues. We're always rushing, you know, I'm always running behind. So due to the lack of time, oftentimes people don't take the time to hear about these issues. The practice model in general is poor for handling these problems. So we try to overcome that the best we can. And there's a lot of skepticism about new therapies in this area because there's so many hangups with sex, especially for women. There's so many hangups, and so it just shuts everybody down, including the people providing the care. So media, right, crap information. There's a huge gender bias. Social media has a massive gender bias. Sorry, Facebook, we're on you now, but you know, you got problems. You're not allowed to use, and I'm going to use it anyway, you're not allowed to use the word vagina on a lot of the social media channels, but you can use penis. You can use all kinds of things that are specific to male therapy, but not female. And obviously, that opens up to a lot of fraud. So the people selling snake oil, selling you all kinds of junk that doesn't work, and when you're desperate and you don't understand anything, you fall for it, right? So our goal is really to try to help you get around that, in addition to just providing good care. Institutionally, there's also a lot of gender bias. So the government doesn't reimburse women's health as well. They don't pay for a lot of the same equivalent types of therapies that they do in men. There continues to be a very paternalistic approach in Congress and definitely at the executive branch now. And a lot of overregulation and you know, obviously reproductive issues are getting squeezed even more. And this all gets lumped in with that. The example, so some of the gender gap that exists in care. So these are, I don't think I can use this as a pointer, but these are just a summary, there's more, but these are just summary of medications that are approved by insurance for men. Those are the ones that are approved for women for sexual dysfunction. That's it. And those had to go through congressional approval after being rejected and lawsuits to be approved. So there's, again, just a massive, massive bias. They don't work very well, by the way, but they exist. Sure. Oh, because they don't care. Well, I'll give you an example. So in terms of why erectile dysfunction is covered and not the equivalent for female orgasmic dysfunction, which, you know, if you've been with me, we talk about a lot. The reason that they justify, both in the government and insurance companies justify not paying for female, is it is not required for reproduction, right? So if a man doesn't have an erection, they can't reproduce. If a woman doesn't have the equivalent, then it doesn't matter, right? And right, well, right, but it's we know it's baloney, but that's the justification. So yeah. So anyway, so massive, massive bias out there. We're trying to be at least a little voice out there to overcome it, and certainly with our patients, we work hard to do that. So now we're going to start talking about some of the advanced therapies. So I'm going to focus on sort of specific therapies, talk about where they fit in. It's going to go fast, so just if you don't understand something, really want to drill down on something, stop me. That's fine. So in terms of looking at, we're going to talk about energy-based therapies. So energy-based therapies within women's health basically boils down to lasers and radiofrequency devices. Those are the two main things that we use. What do we use them for? We use them for vaginal laxity, so that's looseness in the vagina, atrophy, so that's menopausal changes, the tissue getting thin, uncomfortable, dry, pain with sex, frequent urinary tract infections, vaginal infections. We're going to go into a little more detail. Urinary incontinence, mild prolapse, so it works for losing support in your pelvis to an extent. So we grade prolapse from 0 to 4. It works from 1 and 2 stages, but not really for 3 and 4. It's beyond what this can do. Orgasmic disorders, There are skin conditions that we'll talk about a little bit that these therapies help with enormously. Pain with sex, that's what dyspareunia means. Scarring in the vagina, either from surgery, not that I ever have surgery that has scars, but some scars in the vagina, and it can happen with trauma, it can happen with tissue changes, and then obviously aesthetic appearance. So we can change the way things look if you don't like the way things look. We'll talk a little about a laser. So what the laser is it's using light from the visible light spectrum, right? That's basically what it uses. A laser or a light moves in waves, so it has an amplitude, it has a height, so it's moving like this, but very fast. It's going at the speed of light. So what laser stands for is light amplification by the stimulation or stimulated emission of radiation. So that's the acronym for laser. When they first were thinking of the technology, instead of using amplification, they were going to use oscillation. But if you look at the acronym, it doesn't turn out very well. It spells loser. So, so they changed it. So a laser, in terms of the basics of a laser, it's really very, very simple. You have a box, and you have what's called a gain medium, which most of the time is a crystal. And the reason for that is it vibrates at exactly the same wavelength all the time. You can also use a gas. CO2 is a common one we use. But it's something that vibrates when it's stimulated at exactly the same wavelength all the time. And then you have an energy source. Usually it's a very powerful lamp that heats up the box and starts stimulating that gain medium, that crystal. And what that does is it starts emitting this wavelength. It bounces around in this box really fast and then comes out a very focused little tiny area. And because it's a particular crystal or gas, it's only a single wavelength of light. And that's what makes it a laser. So, but what the definition of a laser is a single wavelength of light, as opposed to white light, which is all the wavelengths of the visible spectrum. Right? Urogynecologist, we all remember, like from high school or elementary school, or depending on your school. Maybe graduate school, I don't know. So anyway, so that's basically how it works. So the concept is pretty simple. It's a question of how do you turn that into something that's clinically effective and safe, and that's really where the complicated part comes in. So if anybody has ever had a laser treatment with us or anybody else, that looks awesome. You know that it goes through an arm, so it's either an arm, so the metal arms are just open tubes with mirrors in them, and it gets the laser through an instrument at the end, and then that instrument focuses the beam in a certain way, and that's where most of the technology tends to be, right at the end of it, and onto your target site. And then the other way we can do it is optical fibers, so fiber optics, just like your cable. And so light is going down the fiber optics onto a focusing lens and then treats the tissue. And the way that we filter out the wavelengths and the way that the energy is delivered and the amount of energy and the shape of the energy, depth of the energy, all those things is really what creates the effect. So there's a number of different ways that the light can interact with a tissue. It could just bounce off, which is reflecting. It can scatter, which kind of gives you a wider area of treatment. It can go straight through without doing anything, depending on the wavelength in the tissue. Or it could be 100% absorbed into the tissue. And in terms of clinical uses, it's these two really that we're using. So we're either trying to scatter it along the surface for superficial treatments or absorb for deeper treatments in the tissue. The term that we use for treating this is called photothermal lysis, meaning photo is light, thermo is heat, and lysis is destruction in Greek. And so we're trying to use light to destroy tissue in a controlled way, obviously. And particularly what we're doing is selective photothermal lysis. So by using a laser, you use certain wavelengths to interact with certain types of tissue, and you can avoid treating other types of tissue. So that allows you to get your clinical endpoint, your goal for what you're treating, without damaging any other tissue in the area. So if anybody's ever had hair removal or understand how that works, it's targeting reds and browns and blacks and avoiding brown, like brown skin color or kind of the skin color we all have, right? Various shades of what we have. So it targets more the hair color and not the skin color, right? So, and particular wavelengths are picked out to be able to do that. So if you pick the wrong laser, you could actually just be zapping everything. So that's basically how it works. Chromophores are what our targets are for most of what, and it can either be blood, melanin, which is the pigment in our skin or in the hair, porphyrin, which is connective tissue, and then water. And for our purposes, for what we do in our practice, it's primarily water is our target. That's what the general, so we're targeting the water in your tissue to be able to remodel that tissue. And the reason for that is the skin contains mostly water, and most of what we're doing is just skin remodeling or skin resurfacing. So that's the one that we're primarily going after. If you look at, these are all different types of lasers. These are the two types of lasers we have in the office, and they both target water. So we have erbium lasers and carbon dioxide lasers. Those are the ones that make the most sense for use in women's health. So by picking the right laser, by picking the right wavelength, you can target what you want. So our erbium and CO2 are going to treat the skin very well. The vagina is skin. It is just doesn't have the dead layer that we have on our surface. So it's non-keratinized epithelium. The keratin is the thick dead layer, but otherwise it's the same as the rest of your body. It's just skin. It's magic skin, but it's skin. So, and then we can use obviously other wavelengths to do other things. All right, so we'll move on here. Yeah, while I switch, feel free to ask questions.
You didn't say, like, what are you doing? You, like, shoving this thing up someone's vagina?
I'm about to.
Okay.
This was to give you a background on understanding what it is. Now I'm going to show you how we use it. but good point. How do I get out of this? Yeah, yes, that is one. It's a bad one, but it's I shouldn't. I'm on. Yeah. It is the original one. Yeah, it doesn't do as much as some of the newer technologies. Anybody know why I can't? Why am I stuck in this talk? I just want to go back to the drive. Usually if you hit escape, and then do I have to go back? This is like,
Is there any sensitive thing on the drive or anything?
no. It's not doing anything. Oh yeah, there we go. Okay, yeah, it's that one. Okay. Perfect. Okay, so to your point, we're going to talk about how we use this. So I just wanted everybody to have some basic understanding of what the technology is, so that like it's just, we never have time to talk about that if you're in the office. So, you know, here you made the effort to come here, just trying to give you a little more background. Now we're going to actually talk about how we use this for particular conditions. So this is what everybody thinks about when they think about a laser, right? They're like, oh my God, you're going to be blasting me. You're going to be setting everything on fire. And this is not the case. Now you can do this with a laser, but not the lasers we're using. So the lasers we're using are very, very superficial. They treat in the area of microns, both in terms of the width and the depth. So not much more than a sheet of paper for our typical treatments. And that's all very, very controlled. So this, get that image out of your mind. The other thing that has really a misunderstanding associated with it is these are some kind of like crazy, only for movie star cosmetic type treatments. These are functional treatments. We're normal people with normal problems, everyday issues that bother everyone. So you don't have to feel like, vaginal laser is like some crazy thing that only happens in Beverly Hills or anything like that. We have them too, and they treat very normal, routine conditions. So in terms of understanding it, we went over this list already. I won't reiterate it, but these are the types of conditions we use these technologies for. So the most common ones in our practice that we use is for vulvovaginal atrophy. The other term that's used for that is genitourinary syndrome of menopause. Say that 10 times fast. GSM is the abbreviation. Apparently, it is more PC than vaginal atrophy. Whatever. And then, it helps enormously with dryness, enormously with pain with sex, associated with skin conditions, skin issues. So either atrophied vaginal tissue, atrophied outside, other skin conditions like lichen sclerosis is a common one. That's a common one that falls under the vulvar dystrophy, or basically anything that can change that tissue in a negative way. It also helps with prolapse. Prolapse is very common. This is super busy slide. Don't worry about the details. This is data mostly from the Women's Health Initiative study. So if anybody's familiar with that, there was a huge study done in the early 2000s. It's where all the negative stuff of hormones came out of, which has been mostly debunked. But they also looked at pelvic support. And what they found is that 60% of women after menopause have at least a stage 2 prolapse. So it's extremely common problem. So prolapse is losing support in your pelvis, bladder falling down, rectum falling down. We're going to talk about a little more in a second, but very, very common problem. It's only becomes a problem in terms of treating it when it crosses a line in terms of interfering with your quality of life, right? Just like a hernia, if it's just little teeny tiny hernia not really bothering you, then you don't need to do anything about it. But once it starts affecting things, it starts affecting the way your bladder works, bowels work, sex works, etc., then it's time to do something. Atrophy, so vaginal atrophy is also extremely common. So once you get postmenopausal, about 50% of women are going to have significant symptomatic vaginal atrophy. Even young women can have this too, though, and that is often missed. And there's a couple of reasons for that. One would be, kind of rare cases like Ashley's, where you had a surgical menopause early in life. But even if you're on certain medications and don't have that, the same thing can happen. A very, very common one is women who are on progesterone-only birth control. So IUDs that have progestin in them only, or progestin-only pills, what that does is shuts your estrogen off. And some women are more sensitive to it than others, but it essentially sets up a medical menopause. And your vagina doesn't see any estrogen, and you start having all the same symptoms that somebody in menopause would have. But you go to a regular OBGYN and you have an IUD, and they're never going to think about that. That would never be brought up. So if young women are having the same symptoms, it's probably the same problem. It's just from a little bit of a different cause. Pain with sex, extremely common. So, about 10 to 20% of women have pain with sex. Just baseline, if you get into a postpartum period of time, it's about 41%. You get into, I think I have it here, yeah. Premenopausal in general is about 30%. Postmenopausal is about 50% in terms of pain with sex. If you get into our population of patients who have pelvic floor issues, it's about 60%. Get into patients who have hormone-derived cancers and then have had cancer therapy, right, who cannot have hormones or have not had hormones for a very long period of time, gets up into the 70, 80, even 90% range in some studies. And oftentimes your therapies are limited because you have to be careful about hormones. And the nice thing about these types of therapies is it doesn't matter. It doesn't require hormones to work. So hormones are awesome, don't get me wrong. And we use them all the time and we love them, and she's the queen of them. But in obviously in certain situations like estrogen receptor positive breast cancer, we can't use them, right? So we have to be smart about what we use. Talk a little bit about anatomy, right? So this is the normal anatomy. I don't have a pointer, but you can see the vagina goes inside. This is what you typically see in textbooks. It doesn't tell you anything. So, so the vagina is held in place by essentially a suspensory system in the pelvis in terms of the way the connective tissue works. So there are ligaments that hold the top of the vagina in place. This is somebody that's had a hysterectomy. And so presumably they attach the ligaments again correctly. These are called the uterosacral ligaments. And then there's connective tissue that runs between the vagina and bladder and between the vagina and the rectum. In the back there, it's called the rectovaginal septum. And then there's muscles at the bottom, the perineal muscles, which is the anal sphincter muscles that run around the opening of the vagina called the bulbocavernosus muscles, and muscles that come from the side of the pelvis called the transverse perineal muscles. So it acts like a big suspensory system in the pelvis holding everything in place. When that breaks down, then you start to have problems. So this is a look at the muscles in more like a real time. So these are the deeper muscles, the Kegel muscles. The real name is the levator ani muscles. There's one called the pubococcygeus muscle, which acts like a big sling around the pelvis. And this is the iliococcygeus muscle, which acts like a floor or a bowl. And then the coccygeus, which is a stabilizing muscle. And then the superficial muscles that I just talked about, you can see that form like a cross more superficially. So when you have kids, that all gets messed up, right? It all, and I have a picture, I think, in one a little bit here that kind of shows how that happens. The other thing is the tissue, right? So as we talked about, the vaginal lining is skin. It's a non-keratinized epithelium, right? It needs to have a certain thickness. It has to have a certain amount of blood vessels in it, a certain amount of collagen in it, elastin in it, to have the give that it needs to do to function. So the way that the vagina lubricates is fluid leaking across the skin in the vagina called a transudate. So the capillaries or small blood vessels leak fluid into the vagina. It does it a little bit all the time so that you don't feel dry and uncomfortable just normally. And then the blood vessels dilate during sexual stimulation to exaggerate the response. So when you lose blood vessels, which happens when you lose hormones, those go away, and then the response goes away in turn. So all the therapies that we work on, hormones, so estrogen, and these therapies all help restore that, help bring the blood vessels back. There's a deeper layer called the lamina propria in the vagina. So the blood vessels and the connective tissue and collagen are in that top kind of pink layer there, and then down below are the blood vessels and the nerves. And that layer is important because if you want to get neurogenesis or new nerves, new sensation, then you have to be able to get into that layer. So somebody brought up Mona Lisa. One of the big problems with Mona Lisa is it only goes 200 microns at maximum into the tissue, which isn't deep enough to get into that deeper layer and cause more significant remodeling. But the technologies we have here are able to get deep enough. You had a question?
I was wondering what
It's a brand of laser. It's a CO2 laser. So credit to it for being the first one on the market and kind of bringing the technology to light. But it's a more basic technology than what we have now. All right, this is your clitoris. So this is your clitoris on drugs. Don't do drugs. No. So the clitoris is a more substantial organ than you think about. The only thing people really know is the glans, right, which is little part of in front of the urethra. But in essence, the clitoris is a small split penis, and it makes sense because embryologically we come from the same stuff. At some point in development, we divide into male and female, but we're starting in the same place. And so you have a shaft to the clitoris, and then you have the corpus cavernosum and the crust of the clitoris, which are vascular structures that run around the opening of the vagina. And all of that working is what helps the most with sex. It's not just the glands. The glands does have the majority of the nerve endings, but the whole thing working well is important. And so when we treat the clitoris, we're treating the whole structure. Okay, so we're going to talk a little bit about prolapse. So what prolapse is losing support in the pelvis. Having kids is the biggest risk factor, but anything that causes strain can stretch or tear the connective tissue in your pelvis. So straining to move your bowels, lifting heavy things, to some extent genetics in terms of the strength of your connective tissue can all cause the pelvis to weaken. This is the biggest culprit. So this is what I was talking about. This big head coming through there can cause a lot of damage, right? So it can stretch and tear the tissue. It can compress the nerves. So the pudendal nerve, which is the motor nerve to the pelvis, comes out of a very susceptible place to get damaged. It's called Alcott's canal. It's kind of right on the side of the pelvis where your sit bone is. And as the baby's head comes through there, it compresses the nerve and it stretches the nerve past that point. Because anybody that's ever seen a delivery knows that the bottom kind of pushes way down when you are delivering, and that nerve can get stretched. And the degree to which it recovers varies, right? So if it doesn't recover well, weakness in your pelvic floor muscles is a problem. So it feeds your pelvic floor muscles, it feeds the anal sphincter, it feeds the urethral sphincter, and it feeds the clitoris. And so if that nerve is damaged, any of the above things can be affected, plus just the connective tissue. Stress incontinence is a common consequence, so losing support to the urethra because the connective tissue is no longer holding the urethra well. Prolapse, so the connective tissue between the structures in the pelvis also. All right, we lost enough, and we typically give a 1/2 to 1 gram twice a week. Yeah, we're working now. A 1/2 to 1 gram twice a week. That is usually enough to help the vaginal tissue, but not enough to substantially raise your plasma levels or have your rest of your body see a lot. And so most times, the oncologist treating the breast cancer will be okay with that dose. But it should never be done without the okay of your oncologist, because depending on how aggressive your cancer is, what your recurrence risk is, the stage of the cancer, all these things matter. So the oncologist, in terms of the safety of the estrogen, is always the final word. We always defer to them in terms of whether that's safe or not. So yeah. So most of the time it's okay, but you got to be careful. Should you probably want to, but there's no have to. But it's we're talking about so a lot of that you didn't talk about. So pills in general are not the greatest option for a couple of reasons. One, the body metabolizes, the GI tract metabolizes through the liver the medication before it gets to most of your body. So pills don't get to your urogenital tissues. It doesn't get to the skin. It can help with vasomotor symptoms like hot flashes and help with mood and things like that, but it doesn't tend to help the rest of your body. The other is most of the oral medications are synthetic. So meaning they're altered from an actual naturally occurring hormone. There's a million different types of estrogen, a million types of progesterone and testosterone. What you want is bioidentical forms. So 17-beta estradiol is the type that occurs in the human body, and that's the kind you want. All right, so anything that a pharmaceutical company makes, and we're probably going to get canceled here for me saying this, but anything that a pharmaceutical company makes has been altered. And the reason it's altered is because they can't patent it otherwise, and then they can't keep the money when they sell it and keep the prices high. So if you're buying something from a pharmaceutical company, it's been altered from its natural state. We try to use bioidentical hormones because they're safer and they're more effective. And we try not to use oral routes because it's more effective. All right. Back to the subject at hand. Types of urinary incontinence. There's a lot, but the two most common types are urge incontinence, which is the bladder having spasms it can't control, or stress incontinence, which is the urethra not closing well. Those are the two most common kinds. In terms of the ratios of them, about 50% of all female incontinence is stress incontinence. And only about 22% is actually pure overactive bladder, which is exactly the opposite of what you would think based on a number of commercials you see for overactive bladder medications. But urge is a symptom, it is not a diagnosis. And if anybody in here who's been with me for a long time knows I drive you crazy about doing bladder testing if you're not doing well. And the reason why is because people telling us their symptoms versus us objectively seeing it on the test doesn't match up very well. So only about 40% of the time does somebody telling us how their bladder is functioning tell us exactly what the problem is. So we really do need the testing if we're not making headway or not understanding things to really understand the diagnosis. But yeah, only 22% is overactive bladder, and mixed incontinence, which means a combination of the two, makes up about 30%. In terms of what we've had for this, watchful waiting, which is doctor speak for doing nothing. There's a lot of that, right? Over-the-counter products, that's just going to be your Depends. That's in my opinion given up. Obviously I'm biased there. We do have some medications depending on the problem, mostly for overactive bladder, not really for stress incontinence. Overactive bladder medications, most studies in terms of the anticholinergics, which are the most common kind, show they barely work better than placebo and do have a lot of side effects: dry mouth, dry eyes, constipation, in older folks, cognitive issues. So and it has been shown to increase the risk of dementia. So we don't love those, but they sometimes work. Pelvic floor therapy obviously is always good. The stronger and more coordinated your muscles, the better off you're going to be. And then we have surgery, which works fantastically for stress incontinence. But that for some people, depending on the degree of the problem, is a big jump. So if we have something in between that can tighten the connective tissue in your pelvis, like the laser, which is just a quick office treatment, no recovery, no pain, and you're back to normal life, and that lasts for a year and you need a touch-up treatment, for a lot of people that makes a lot of sense, right? If it's too severe, if it's going on too long, if you don't succeed with the other therapies, the surgeries in the realm of surgery are very small, very safe, very successful, but we do have that in-between option for the right people. So that's a nice thing to have. In terms of atrophy, so the typical symptoms, and you can see here what an atrophic vagina looks like. You can see how pale it is, how fragile it is. So just the exam is making things bleed. There's no stretch to the tissue, so that's why sex starts getting uncomfortable. And dry, so itching, burning, dryness, burning with urination, frequent urinary tract infections, frequent vaginal infections, all start happening more often. The other thing in terms of UTIs, and unfortunately, these types of issues have chronic UTIs with them very frequently. When the vagina loses its estrogenation, when the tissue starts breaking down, it doesn't make a glycogen substance, which is like food for the healthy bacteria in the vagina. So there's always bacteria everywhere all over us. In the vagina, it should mostly be lactobacillus, which is the healthy bacteria that are there. Lactobacillus makes lactic acid, which keeps the pH of the vagina low. And that low pH, the acidic pH, kills everything else. So you don't get the other bacteria that are still all over the place trying to get in there all the time. They can't succeed because the pH is too low. And when that breaks down, all those pathogens, all those things that cause problems, can get in there and start causing problems. The other thing is you lose IgA, which is an immunoglobulin that sort of binds up bacteria and gets rid of it easily. And that also starts going away when you lose estrogenation in the vagina. So these therapies reverse that. And so the laser, obviously hormones reverse it the way our body kind of normally functions. Lasers function in a different way, but accomplishes the same goal in a lot of ways in the vagina much better without using hormone. The pink things?
Yeah. Right.
This? Oh, that? Those are the bacteria. That's what they look like. They have little arms and they can stick to the. I mean, that's E. coli. If anybody, yeah. So it's gross when you look up and close. Yeah. But that's what they look like. All right, so I'm doing all this talking, and then I get, what's the pink thing? All right. All right. Okay. In terms of treatments that we've had for this, we have non-hormonal treatments. Basically, that's over-the-counter lubrication. If the symptom's mild, that works. And then we have the low-dose estrogen cream that we talked about. Sometimes the cream is messy. A lot of times it doesn't work. Not everybody absorbs medication through their skin well. We also have rings and tablets. The problem with rings and tablets is it tends to just treat the tissue that it's in contact with. And so there was a large study done by the Journal of American Medicine that concluded about 7 years ago at this point, looking at Vagifem, which is a little estrogen tablet. It's nice in that it's clean, it's convenient, but it was no better than placebo in terms of a very large randomized prospective study, which is our high quality studies. And it's only because it's the size of like a pin tip and it's treating the size of a pin tip. So if it doesn't get everywhere, it's not going to treat everywhere. We also have systemic estrogen therapy, and that's terrific if you can do it and you're doing well with it. If it's not working, or if the issue in the vagina is too severe for that to make enough change, then these therapies start making sense. So the hormonal therapies don't always work, and when they don't work, the laser therapy pretty much always works. So that's the advantage. Vulvar dystrophies, so there's some skin conditions. This most common one is called lichen sclerosus. It's basically like psoriasis or eczema, but in this part of the body, it causes the skin to get very thick, very irritated, crack, burn, and worse, it starts ruining the architecture or the anatomy, meaning like the labia can go away, the opening of the vagina can start closing, the urethra can get closed off, the clitoral hood or exposure of the clitoris can get cut off. So it can cause really serious functional problems. Our basic treatment for it is clobetasol, so high potency steroid that can most of the time is done topically, can be injected. All of these don't work, so I have them listed here because they are used, but none of them work. And then we have laser therapy here. And the advantage of the laser therapy is that it's completely remodeling this tissue. So it actually, in addition to getting rid of the inflammation and the skin condition, it can get the anatomy largely back to normal. Whereas the clobetasol can calm everything down, but it can't change the anatomy. It can't fix the anatomy, right? It can kind of stop it where if it works well, it can stop it where it's where you were. But say the clitoris is blocked off, it's not going to undo that process, whereas the laser can. And that's just, it's just quick treatments in the office. They only take a few minutes. We give you a topical numbing medicine. You don't feel anything. Afterwards, it feels like you have a sunburn in a weird part of your body that's gone after a couple days. But that's it. That's the only recovery to it. It does take a series of treatments, and I'll explain why in a second. Sensory disorders too, so orgasmic disorders, hormone replacement, estrogen, progesterone don't really work for orgasmic disorders. Testosterone can sometimes, in that it can make the clitoris a little bigger. So bigger target, help a little bit. Obviously, there's a limit to what anybody wants as far as that goes, right? So that only can go so far and doesn't always work. Yeah. Well, most people don't want to be near the 18-year-old boy. So it's just like, yeah, you don't want to be there, and we won't get you there. And so what these therapies do, what energy-based therapies do, is it helps get the blood vessels and nerves back into that tissue so it's sensitive and responsive again. And so it does help with sexual function. Yeah.
I have a question, and I actually don't know. Vibrators damage the
No.
nerves.
No.
Is that something, I don't know.
I mean, not unless you're using something that's like, if it has a horsepower at the end of the 10 horsepower, then maybe, but no, not normally. No, so yeah, there's a misconception that like overstimulating can, in fact, it's opposite. in a lot of ways, if you don't use it, you lose it, kind of just like anything else, you know. So, so no. The simple answer is no. So how does this stuff work? So there's different ways we can use a laser. One is called full ablative resurfacing, meaning we're taking the entire surface of the tissue off and letting it remodel. That does not work for vaginal treatments. And the reason for that is this is a collapsed tube, and if you completely make the surface raw, it's all going to stick on itself and actually close. So that's the worst thing you can do for these types of treatments. It can be done on your face. You look like a lobster for a couple of weeks, but it's a one treatment and then you're done. We cannot safely do that in the vagina because of the anatomy. So what we do is fractional, and it's a combination of fractional ablative, meaning it actually makes little defects in the tissue, or non-ablative, which heats the tissue up without actually making a defect, both of which stimulate a healthy wound healing response. So those are the type we use. We never use this. And then with radiofrequency, we can either use monopolar, which just means like one contact point on the tissue, or multipolar, meaning has multiple contact points on the tissue, and it can work in a different way. In general, what they're doing is they're heating the tissue up to stimulate a healthy wound healing effect. So releasing growth factors into the tissue, stimulating collagen, stimulating elastin, neocollagenesis. So type 1 collagen is basically a spring, you know. So why does little kids like have the nice stretchy cheeks and you pull them way out and then they spring right back again? And then I do it to myself now, it just stays there now. So, yeah, so the reason is because that type 1 collagen is exactly, you know, molecularly like a spring. So as you lose that, you lose the stretchiness and comfortableness in your tissue, and these therapies help restore that. It helps restore the blood vessels like we were talking about. So you get angiogenesis, and that helps with the dryness and the sexual response. And then you get a whole host of growth factors released from these treatments as well. And so that also helps stimulate healthy tissue. In terms of, I'm not going to go into a lot of detail on this, is like beyond the scope of tonight. But this was the first big study done in the United States looking at this. This is my colleagues, Dr. Eric Sokol is a friend of mine. He's at Stanford, Mickey Krams in Ohio. And they did a first study looking at this technology for treating atrophy, and they had excellent results at 1 year. So the treatment, it's 3 treatments a month apart, and that effect lasts 12 to 18 months. And then it needs a single retreatment. This is a study looking at cancer, breast cancer survivors. The point of this study is that breast cancer survivors did just as well as your baseline population who didn't have cancer with this treatment. So both populations do just as well because this doesn't depend on hormones to work. This is looking at radiofrequency. Again, very excellent outcomes, very similar outcomes. Treatment's a little slower in terms of the length of treatment. The laser is a bit more efficient. And then this is looking at urinary incontinence in terms of treating stress incontinence using laser. In general, we get about a 50% improvement in symptoms. So if you have relatively mild symptoms, that does a pretty good job for you. If you have severe symptoms, this isn't going to get you where you want to go as far as incontinence is concerned. And this is looking at the laser versus estrogen. At 1 year, the laser did better for the treatment of atrophy than the estrogen. This is vaginal estrogen. For lichen sclerosis, similar treatment. I'll fly through this. This is a 5-center study that we did, looking at the laser for 12 months. And so it was a 1 year randomized prospective study, and we had excellent outcomes. We looked at sexual function, significant improvement in sexual function across the board, looking at all these factors, and looking at the vaginal health index, so elasticity, fluid volume, pH, how thick the skin was, moisture, and it all significantly improved after a year. This is a slide looking at the number of blood vessels and collagen. And you can see in the 3-month post-treatment, the light blue is collagen, so a lot more collagen, and the red is blood vessels, so a lot more blood vessels. And then this is just a biopsy in terms of the thickness of the vaginal tissue. With the laser treatment, we saw at 12 months 153% increase in the thickness, so more than double the thickness of the tissue with these treatments. So excellent results, and no adverse events.
That's the effect of the laser over time. I mean, it's the laser wounds the thing, and so it heals 100 to 153%.
We don't say wounding. We
You know what I mean.
healthy healing response.
Yeah. So it gets better over time.
Correct. Yeah. So you start noticing things immediately, but it continues to improve in terms of where that starts to level off. It's somewhere in the 3 to 6 month standpoint, and then it kind of stays level to about a year, and then starts drifting down. So in general, our retreatment is at 1 year, but it's only one treatment. It's not 3, which is the baseline treatment. In terms of we talked about lichen. This is just shows, this is only after 1 treatment. Our protocol is 5, but this is somebody with severe skin changes. It was treated once with a laser, and you can see the thick white irritated tissue, the very swollen labia. It's much reduced. It's not gone in 1 treatment, but it's much reduced, and that's only 1 treatment. Then also this can be used aesthetically, so we can use it for aesthetic labial reduction. So you can see here that this was pre-treatment, immediately after treatment, obviously irritated looking, and then recovered. So the labial minora which are the inside lips, can be reduced in size as well. IPL is another. So this is intense pulse light. So the difference here is, instead of it being a laser, which is a single wavelength, it's selected wavelength. So it's multiple wavelengths. That's often used for hair removal because everybody's hair can be slightly different colors. So you might have a little red hair, a little brown hair, a little blonde hair. And so it kind of gets to all the wavelengths. But it also can tighten the skin. So we use it to tighten the vulvar skin in people that wish to have that done. So you can see before and after pictures here in terms of the improvement and the redundancy of the labia majora, which are the outside lips here, the vulva. And that similarly, same kind of treatment protocol, needs to be just repeated once a year. All right, so we have questions on that. That was the big talk. Then I have a couple little quick things. So while we're switching over, if there's any questions. Yes, in the back.
Question, as far as the laser and then
I got this down.
Will the laser take care of you not having to use the cream, or
the vaginal cream?
Yeah.
Yeah, you don't need both usually. Yeah, the laser, statistically, the laser works better. It's not covered by insurance, so we didn't talk about that part. It's not covered by insurance. So
right.
Depending on how well the estrogen is covered, how well it's working for you, that may factor into your decision making. But we have ample data showing it works better than vaginal cream.
Just some background, I'm a 2-time breast cancer survivor, and I always thought I couldn't have anything until
Yeah.
doctor
Oh, good.
Anything is possible, y'all. I don't know if you're a patient here or not, but yeah, she changed my life forever. And I'm 48, so I've been put into menopause at 34. So,
Yeah, well, congratulations for being here. All right, these are shorter, so I just gave you the fire hose. These are a little less little less involved. I don't want to start running out of steam here. So the other thing, and Annie alluded to this at the end of her talk, is we have fairly advanced pelvic floor therapy treatment, so meaning your muscles. So we'll talk a little about that. In terms of treating these things, like, what do people want, right? Obviously, I mean, I'm a surgeon, so I'll even agree to the first one. If it can be treated non-surgically, then you probably want to treat it non-surgically. Obviously, that's not always the case, but you want it discreet. You know, these are sensitive issues, and I congratulate everybody here for coming out and being willing to talk about this, because it's not always the easiest thing to do. We're used to it, but not everybody is. You want, obviously, no downtime, no pain, and typically, if it's effective, you're willing to repeat it, right? If it's easy enough. So we're talking about these muscles again. So this is the $1 million quiz for the night. So if you get this, we'll give you 2 cookies. What's the difference between this pelvis and every other pelvis I've shown here tonight? Let's see if anybody gets it. Nope. Good. That's good. Bum, 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 bum. Anybody?
Got good color?
No. No. Anybody? There's 2 different kinds of pelvises. Yeah, this is male. So yeah, so there's no vagina, right? There's a urethra, anus. The point is that men have the same muscles as women, right? So men have the same muscles. Sometimes they have issues too, not as commonly, but sometimes they have issues too. So we talked about these again. The way these muscles work is, especially the pubococcygeus, which is that horseshoe, acts like a sling around. This is the rectum, the vagina would be here, the urethra would be here. And so it acts like a sling, closing those organs off under normal circumstances. So when that muscle works correctly, it slams the door shut in terms of anything coming out of the pelvis. When that muscle gets damaged, torn, or the nerve to it gets damaged and it doesn't have good tone anymore, that sling stretches out and then forces can come down and out much more easily. So a normal angle of vagina is not straight inside the body like we showed in that picture before. The lower third, this is actually like probably from 1920, but an X-ray with contrast in the vagina, you can see the lower part of the vagina is vertical, but the upper part is almost horizontal in a standing position. And that's a more accurate depiction of what a vagina actually looks like in the body. And the reason for that is when there's downward force, it goes this way under normal circumstances and everything closes to prevent it from coming out. And when that starts breaking down is when you start getting the support problems. Most basic form of therapy that we use, the typical physical therapy, pelvic floor therapists do this, is biofeedback. So they put a probe in the vagina that picks up the muscle activity and help you get visual and auditory feedback in terms of when you're doing things right, when you're doing things wrong. That's great if you have a decent amount of muscle function left, but if your muscles don't work, it doesn't work either, because it relies on your ability to do it. So traditional pelvic floor therapy is limited in the sense that if you can't do it, you can't get past that point. So you need something to help you get past that point. So these are just some of the different probes. So that's really where what's called high intensity focused electromagnetic therapy comes in terms of pelvic floor therapies. It doesn't rely on your ability to use your muscles. It does it for you until you get to the point where you can do it on your own. So what the chair is, it's called Emsella. It's completely non-invasive. It is FDA approved for urinary incontinence, both in men and women, and anything in between nowadays, and also for sexual dysfunction. So it helps improve blood flow and improve muscle function. That also helps with sexual function, and that's also approved, FDA approved in both men and women. The way it works is that you have a coil, so the seat here has a big coil in it, almost like an MRI machine, and it creates a focused field that goes about to the level of your belly button above the chair. It's contained into that area, so it's not like flying around the room like an MRI machine where you're worried about, the chain on your neck flying off or anything like that. It's focused in that little area, but when that magnet turns on and off, it forces the muscle to contract, and that can happen very, very quickly. And so Annie alluded, a typical 28-minute session is 11,400 contractions. if you look at a typical physical therapy session, it's 200 contractions. And these are what are called supramaximal contractions, meaning they contract harder and faster than anything you could ever do on your own. So this is kind of on an EMG or something that measures muscles. Yeah. Nope. Yeah, it feels kind of like vibration. Because yeah, we're gonna let people try it. So, it's happening so fast. It feels like a vibration. It's not like a painful squeeze. But anyway, so it works harder and faster than what it can do. So this is an ultrasound. This is the thickness of the pelvic floor muscle on ultrasound before the treatment with Emsella, and this is afterwards. So you could see it almost doubled the thickness in terms of the muscle hypertrophy. Just like if you work out your biceps, they get bigger. Same thing. So it actually works. This is how you sit on it. You're not naked. You're not missing your genitalia or your hair, and you don't have some weird red bar on you. But you basically just sit there. And the protocol is 6 sessions over 3 weeks. So it's twice a week for 3 weeks. That's based on the studies. If you don't perfectly stick to the protocol in real life, it still works. But we try to encourage you to stick to it as much as possible because that's what we know works. So very simple. Sit on it. You just ease it up. If you can tolerate 100%, you don't have to. And you just try to hold your position for the 28 minutes. In terms of what we use it for, we can use it for mild to moderate incontinence, both stress and urge incontinence or mixed incontinence. We can use it for sexual dysfunction, either from too tight, being painful, or loose. It works for both. And we also use it for bowel control issues because it helps strengthen the muscles around the anus and in the pelvic floor. And also just neuromuscular education, a very common thing we use just after surgery, just to get everybody's muscles working better again. And like I said, high tone. So those are the patients with high tone muscles or painful tight muscles are harder to treat. This works really well because it exhausts the muscle to the point it finally relaxes, which is the opposite of what you would think when you think about something contracting hard, but it makes it so tired it finally gives up and starts functioning normally. There's a study that I did looking at it. We were looking at incontinence for this, and I did it with a colleague in Louisville, and we had about a 95% success rate in terms of complete dryness. 75% of the patients were completely dry. And that was out to 6 months after the treatment. We then completed a 5-center randomized control study comparing it to the pelvic floor therapy regimen that Harvard Deaconess uses, and it did significantly better. So at this point, we followed it out to 3 years, and it did significantly better, both in terms of alleviating the symptoms and then also in terms of people sticking to the therapy. Because this is so much more comfortable, people are much more willing to do it. When you have a probe being put in you and somebody poking and prodding you, most people aren't thrilled with that idea. So it works significantly better. Yeah.
Can someone fall into the category of anytime they have any
You mean
like
with
you're
sex?
not able, yes.
Yeah, so there is something called coital incontinence.
Okay.
It can be one of two things. If you don't have good support to your urethra, the pressure of pushing on the bladder can make the urine come out. Or sometimes if you get sexually stimulated, particularly with orgasm, it can stimulate an overactive, it's a form of overactive bladder. So it can stimulate the bladder to contract. So either one can happen sometimes. Exercise helps. Exercise helps with sex, helps with vaginal function, even though you may not be working directly on the vagina or the pelvic floor. It improves your hormones, it improves your blood flow, it improves your muscles. And so it's important to go with these issues. And he talked about M-Sculpt. We have that here. That can treat the rest of your body using that same HiFem technology. It's like crazy on your abdomen. That's what I've used it for, and I need more. But it's like you have to kind of experience it to know it, and that's why we try to let people try it. All right. We got one more talk, but I'll happy to answer questions while I'm switching over. Yes.
So I've seen some over-the-counter like hormone creams. What do you think about those? Or do you feel like they need to be prescribed or?
So what those are going to be is almost always phytoestrogens or soy-based or yam-based products. They have estrogen in them, phytoestrogens. The issue is that sorry, I'm male. I can only do one thing at a time. The issue is they're not regulated. So the FDA does not regulate supplements, and so there are studies that, like, you walk into a supermarket or a GNC and you knock 20 bottles of the same stuff off the shelf and you send it to a lab. The amount of what's in there can vary very widely to none to way too much, and so it's not necessarily that they don't work. It's just that you don't know what's going to happen, and so that's the negative. And so, like, as professionals taking care of these problems, we always have to be very wary about telling people to use those, because we want to risk either it not working for you or risking your safety. So for those reasons, we don't recommend them, but they do have real estrogen.
Now, if you do give someone some form of estrogen cream, right? Thinking about what you guys have been speaking of, shouldn't you be treating the other hormones as well to keep everything balanced?
Oh yeah.
Oh.
Yeah. So when we and we talk about this more, and Annie does this all day long.
Yeah.
When we evaluate somebody for their hormones, we look at your symptoms. We go over a comprehensive evaluation or inventory of your symptoms. We get a lab panel that's very sophisticated, looking at all the hormones, looking at both the total amount of hormone and the bioactive portion. Most hormones are bound on proteins and inactive. It's only the active portion that really does anything. So we look at both ratios, and then we also look at other medical conditions that can cause overlapping symptoms, because we don't want to just say, yeah, hey, it's your hormones, when we're missing a thyroid issue or electrolyte issue or other things. So our panel covers all of them, and then you get a tailored treatment. And it very, very rarely is just one thing. So, all right. So we're going to talk a little bit about prolapse, and I got to throw in the cosmetic stuff. So these have a little bit graphic pictures in them. So if you don't want to see that, then shut your eyes. So in terms of we're probably one of the only centers that do a combination of prolapse or kind of traditional urogynecology type procedures and cosmetic procedures together. There are really no other places that I'm aware of that routinely do that. And we've been doing it for a long time. We have excellent success doing that. It's extremely safe. A lot of places will say it's too much. You can't do it all at the same time. That's not true if you have experience and know what you're doing. And the advantage of that is it's just one recovery, as opposed to having multiple procedures, multiple recoveries. And it also just all works better together when you're doing it all at once. Most of the more complex prolapse surgeries I do are robotic. So what that is a system that uses minimally invasive technology using robotic arms. I'm doing the surgery. So there's like sometimes a misunderstanding that a robot means a robot's doing the surgery. We're at this console here moving the arms, and basically it's sophisticated laparoscopy. So if everybody knows what laparoscopy is, they're little instruments that go in the belly. These are 8mm ports, so they're very small. But the advantage of the robot is that the arms move like a human arm. So as opposed to traditional laparoscopic equipment, or what we call straight stick, it moves in, it moves out, it turns, it opens and closes. That's all it can do. What the robotic arms can do, it can move. It has an elbow, it has a wrist, And so it can move just like my arm. It has the same degree of movement, but through that little teeny tiny incision as opposed to my big arm going in there, right? So, so it allows us to do much more complicated procedures through these little tiny incisions. So it's really revolutionized how we treat the more complicated support issues or many other types of surgeries too. So, in terms of what it's like on your belly, either, traditionally you'd have a big incision, a C-section type incision, or a big vertical incision. And it's now, anywhere from 3 to 5 little 8mm incisions that just need a couple stitches to close. She closes them a lot of times. That's my surgical assistant. So. But it's just quick little stitch as opposed to having to have a major recovery with an extremely uncomfortable procedure. Still sore, but the recovery is much, much faster and much easier. All right, so this is where we go a little graphic. So this is a prolapse. So this is everything turning inside out. So that's the cervix, bladder's here, rectum's here, uterus is somewhere in here. So everything has fallen out. The traditional techniques for this would use your own connective tissue and tie. So it uses your own connective tissue using stitches to make everything tighter. The problem with that is, by definition, this tissue has shown it's not going to work, right? It's weak tissue. And so the success rates with these types of repair are abysmal. The success rate in terms of repairing a bladder is at 2 years is a 50% failure rate, and at 5 years is a 70% failure rate. And if it's me, I don't want that. I'm not going to go through a whole surgery with a 6-week recovery and have that kind of success rate. So we've largely, in terms of experts in this field, largely don't do those procedures. Instead, we use grafts. And for the robot, we do what's called a sacral colpopexy, which is a graft that goes between the vagina and rectum, between the vagina and bladder, and then attaches this ligament over your tailbone. So it fixes all the support in the pelvis using a permanent material. It is plastic, but it is not the mesh, so that's long gone. That came from an FDA warning in 2011. Those products are long gone. It was related to transvaginal prolapse products. When they evaluated this was specifically excluded from that because the data is so good. But using a robot, we can do this very complex procedure through just those tiny incisions. I use a particular technique that we developed. There's specialized sutures that don't require any knots and don't have any permanent suture there, so the graft heals in place, and then the sutures go away, which is a big advantage because you don't want knots there that can show up years later if the tissue gets thin and start coming through the tissue. So we invented a technique to avoid that. The other advantage of the robotics is it allows you have a computer between you and the patient. And so it allows us to do things you can't do just with your own eyes. So this is an example. This is what the pelvis would look like in white light. This is the sacrum where I attach the graft. And if I switch it over to a different wavelength, so this is actually a laser wavelength of light with a little dye injected into the veins, I can see a big artery running down the middle of that before I ever make an incision and avoid it. And so this technology allows us to do things you could never do with traditional surgery and increase the safety. All right, so these are just some examples. So this is a patient with, again, complete prolapse. And we did a hysterectomy, so a partial hysterectomy, the sacral colpopexy repair, like I just talked about, a sling, which is a support to your urethra so you don't leak, a vaginoplasty, which is tightening the muscles in the vagina and the opening and repairing the opening of the vagina, and then a labia minoroplasty, which is reducing the labia. And then this is immediately after the procedure. And so that one is immediately after. You can see the difference, obviously. This is another one. So this was not quite as big a prolapse. So it was a prolapse coming to the opening of the vagina, not beyond it. But a lot of destruction you can see of the opening of the vagina in terms of laxity of the muscles, redundant tissue. And so similar procedure, so the same type of prolapse procedure. And we did the labia minoroplasty, vaginoplasty, and clitoral hoodplasty. And then this is 3 months post-operative. So big change there in terms of what it can do. And this is functional too. You know, obviously you see the outside, it looks aesthetic, but those muscles being together makes everything function a lot better too. This is another patient, similar prolapse procedure, and then a vaginoplasty and a labia majoroplasty. So reducing the size of the outside labia, and this is 6 months post-op. So you can see the difference in the tissue there. So for people who this bothers, we can take care of all these problems at the same time. All right, that concludes my spiel. So I'm happy to take questions.